Welcome back to Going to Production. I'm David Dieroff, joined by Wael Rabadi. Over the past 3 episodes, we've explored platform multiplication, Conway's Law, and potential solutions using modern delivery stacks and methodologies. But there's one question we've been dancing around. If these problems are so predictable and the solutions are known, why do good, talented engineering teams keep building the same operational nightmares over and over again? Today, we're tackling the hardest question of all. When good engineers build bad systems. This isn't about incompetence or lack of technical skill. We're talking about smart, experienced engineers who understand best practices, but still end up creating fragile, complex systems that are painful to operate. We'll explore the organizational dynamics, decision-making patterns, and leadership failures that turn good intentions into technical chaos. And most importantly, we'll discuss what engineering leaders can do to create environments where good engineers build good systems.
So David, let's address the uncomfortable truth. We've seen this happen before, right? Many times. What are the warning signs?
The context is what you're looking for here. And that is when you see there are environments that engineers can't control, right? And I say that with a caveat because I understand that security teams want control and you can't do whatever you want to do, but there is a certain amount of control that an engineer needs to be effective. When they're put in just generally bad circumstances, build this and have it by Monday. I'm not going to be able to create anything worth looking at by Monday, right? Bad situation. Monarchies, as we've covered well before, they're in the middle of it. A monarchy of some sort of struggle between 2 different teams that they don't have anything to do with or care about,
right.
But they're in a bad situation, that context. And also the rationale of we made this decision in our box, right? As a team, we made this decision because it made sense for our work, but we never went outside our box to make sure that this was a rational, good thing, right? Those are the kind of the some of the context of watching out for the good engineers, but they're going to be put in a bad place and they're going to be making some bad stuff.
Those are good points, actually. I can think of scenarios where that first thing that you mentioned, I need this done by the end of the sprint. Okay, the sprint is 2 weeks. We haven't gathered enough information. We don't know the details. So now when you think about it, it's like, wait a minute, you need this done by the end of the sprint. And sometimes the definition of done means it's production ready. So it's like, wait a minute, you want me to collect information, which is data, to help me drive my decision to build the right thing and get it out in production ready form. And
this sprint was already probably planned for other stuff as well.
Exactly. That could happen, right? Scope creep.
Yeah.
Oh, that comes up all the time. But I agree with you. So this is what we call, I guess, the context problem.
Yeah.
So if you put in a bad context, well, you could kind of say that's probably going to produce bad results. So let's dive into that a little bit more about the good systems part.
Right.
So what's a good context in that perspective?
I don't think that you have to give someone, all the information, right? But they need to. Well, no. I'm going to figure out a way to point back to leadership because I'm always pointing my finger at leadership. And in this case, it's the same thing. It's
not in a bad way. We're trying to inform.
Right? Yeah, right. But it's giving the engineer, well, as you said, context, right? Giving them enough information. So I think a good example is where the business can come back and say, this is what we want built. We've already done some discovery around what it's going to take to build it. Not technologies or anything, but we understand that what we want built is going to need to handle this many users. What we want built is going to generally have this experience, right? Front end. So we need you to build something under these parameters and these guidelines, right? Enough information, context for the engineer to go back and say, all right, given what they're asking for, given the time frame that I have this in, hopefully it's a reasonable time frame, this is what I can build, and I am meeting all the requirements, right? You're never going to give an engineer like just carte blanche, go for it, right? Here's a blank account, cloud account, do whatever you need to do. We want this made. They're never going to get that, right? The engineer is never going to get a chance to make something that they are completely proud of. And, well, as you said, software is never finished, but that doesn't happen. But you got to give someone a fighting chance here to create something that's reasonable, that's within guidelines, that meets some business parameters. That's really what I'm watching out for. And if you're going to give an engineer a chance, that's what you need to give them.
Let me throw a scenario at you, and I'm curious if you've experienced this in the past in your I guess work history. How often, through your experience or even conversations with others, have you seen engineers really involved in the data gathering, in the requirements gathering, in understanding the problem space? In contrast to, they're just given a story and says, here you go, we figured everything out for you, this is what you got to do.
The only time I've seen it are in small businesses, right? When you get into larger teams, into, corporate kind of environments, I guess, enterprise, we call it, you're never going to get that, right? You're never going to, the developer's never going to be a part of that conversation. And it's by design. I don't think that's a bad thing, but they're never going to be a part of that conversation. The story that they're given, though, needs to follow that context, needs to have that, right? Here's what your load tests need to be passing, right? Here's what your integration tests need to pass. Here's how they need to pass, because here are the other systems that you're going to be using. It's things like that, giving them the understanding of, these are the parameters that I work within. The smaller businesses, the only reason that the developer is a part of that is because there's nobody else to do it, right? The developer wears a ton of hats in a small business, but there's a really brutal trade-off there, because they're not going to have probably the time or the budget that a developer in a enterprise is going to get, or the resources, really, the other people working with them. They're not going to have any of that. It's going to be, a couple of people, maybe just one, and you need to get this done fast. And nobody's watching over your shoulders for quality necessarily. This is just get it done and get it to production. Something else that I think that we haven't really touched on too much in other episodes, which for me, this is a big deal as a developer. And I know this is a big deal for you. And that is developer fatigue and developer toil, right? I've really wanted to touch on this because, and it's a very intangible thing, right? And it leads to turnover, right? I have, and I know you do too, have so many colleagues that do about a 3 to 4 year stint, roughly, and move on, right?
That's true.
You move to the next thing. It's the exact same thing as the previous thing. It's just different domains.
Different problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do that for about 3 or 4 years and they move on. And I've been thinking about this a lot, just over time, and that fatigue and that the fatigue and toil, I think, are what forces them into that place where they get bored, right? So how do you overcome that? Should you overcome that? Is this turnover healthy? Is it okay, right? Do about 4 years and then move on to the next thing. And I was just thinking about that, and a lot of what we've talked about here, Conway's Law and the platform multiplication stuff and alignment between the business and engineering, that it kind of hit me. Those are all the things that create the friction that a developer experiences. Developers want to be developers. They want to be writing code. Now, they don't have to be writing the latest and greatest and new hotness every single day of the week, but it is nice to keep it fresh, right? And to be maybe meeting new people or trying new things, picking tickets out of a backlog, just one right after the other. Like, That gets old after a while. It's nice to just be challenged with something new. And it doesn't have to be that much, but you can create a very healthy relationship there with the developer and the technology and the business by doing that kind of stuff.
Oh, 100% agree. I want to bring up to the topic maybe a couple of ideas there when we talk about solutions. So the purpose of really sharing knowledge is to provide different perspectives. But those perspectives can be composed in many different ways, right? That's the, I'm going to call the execution path. It's the ability to say, I got this wide array of information. I'm going to compose them in so many different ways or in different ways in order to achieve success. I always found through my experience that there are key things you want to provide in a nurturing culture. One is, this comes up a lot, I don't want to train my developers, or I don't want to spend time on training because they're going to end up leaving anyway. Right. So you mentioned like 3 years can be turned negative in that, well, we're not going to spend time with training developers because they're going to end up leaving. But the idea though is that when going back to our prior episode, we talked about building a house, you're bringing in expertise. Like you want a plumber. You don't want a plumber to do an electrical job versus, and the other way around, electrical doing a plumber's job, bad results. So I always say like a nurturing environment becomes, you want your engineers to be well equipped to grow, regardless whether they stay or leave. That in turn, we can argue it's more advanced or more capable engineer to provide more expertise, right?
The funny thing is there, like I make a point of this in the teams that I've managed. I try to make a point with every engineer that I work with to say, what do you love doing? Almost every single one of them, very, very rarely, someone will come back and say, you know, there's this one thing. It's this nuanced little thing. I love working with caches.
Right.
I don't know why, but you love working with caches. I love messaging, right? The idea of messaging or interacting with brokers and managing queues. It's like you might bring in a developer onto the team who's more or less, you know, I guess kind of a general contractor, right, to just get things done. But over time, you're going to find that there's one thing that they kind of love doing, and making them, it may be on the team, it may be in the organization, making them the expert over that over time. You're growing their skill set. It's probably going to be a lot of fun doing it, right? And you're going to have someone that is probably going to bring in some really great solutions to some of your specific business challenges.
100% agree. So we could kind of argue that that's kind of like a leadership responsibility.
Always pointing my finger back to them.
Right. What do you think about psychological safety within that team? Is that a context problem as well?
Personally, what I try to do is a bit of an over communication with the developer. When one of their features gets promoted up, right, and possibly moves away from the team or something like that, I always try to communicate back to him and say, like, it's going on to QA, it's in staging, it went up to production, or is going to be in this release in, you know, a couple of weeks. Great job on that. We're moving on, right? But so they have some sense of ownership there, right, for it. And I think giving the developer that understanding of my thing was a part of a bigger release or a bigger piece, helping them see that. And just showing like, hey, I know I can see that we're not going to fill this sprint, right? We're not going to get everything done in this sprint. It's okay. I talked to, you know, whatever, my boss or boss's boss. They understand. Everybody's on the same page. We're going to be just fine here, right? We'll just continue on. This is what it is, and they understand that what we're trying to do is hard, and we just took a stab at timing. Communicating things like that to the developers, I think really gives everybody a peace of mind of, okay, I'm okay, right? I'm not like, you know, behind by weeks and they think I'm doing a bad job or my job's in jeopardy here because I'm not going to meet the sprint.
No, that's actually a really good call out there. From my experience through labs and some of the engagements we've been on, I found a lot of fulfillment from when we structure product teams. In certain exercises that we ended up doing is bringing the entire team through a discovery journey. So they get a chance to talk to the users. They get a chance to understand the problem space.
That scares engineers to death, talking to users.
I know. But when you embrace it, they are building up so much context.
Ownership. Give them context. Give them bounds that they need to work within. That's engineering, is
Right.
figuring out. You could possibly call that borderline hacking, which is super fun, right? But
Right.
that's the fun of the engineering and writing code is I need to figure out how to get this done within these bounds.
All right. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about engineering leaders. What can they really do?
So, as I've said, this is, for me, this is, it's understanding context, right? That saying, understanding context, goes so far in so many things in my life, right? I understand that while I am capable of painting a car, I should not be painting cars for a living.
Right.
Not that good at it. I understand that context,
Right.
my place in the world there, right? I love turning wrenches and building cars and things like that, but I understand that there's a limit to what I can do there, and unfortunately, I've found that limit too many times. But it's the context of understanding. This is what we're trying to do, right? This is the beginning of the story. This is the end of the story. There's going to be a little bit of unknown here, but
Right.
I know that the unknown here is that's what you love doing. And it may be very hard, even for, leadership of enterprises and things. It may be very hard to agree with this, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, you got to have fun, right? I don't care what size company you work for or what you're doing. If you're not having fun, then this is boring. And why do you
Right.
do it?
Right.
Right? And so having that context, leadership, recognizing the constraints that you need to work in, setting you up for a reasonable outcome from those constraints, like all those kinds of things, that's what I expect of leadership, right?
That makes sense.
It's very hard for them to do. Yeah.
No, I agree.
I think the one of the hardest things for someone leading a team is having the background, right? So many times I have seen that a PM is more or less building the backlog for a development team. And all due respect to product managers out there, but a lot of PMs that I've worked with really don't have a lot of development background. So they don't understand the nuances of it. And they don't understand I am kind of hacking on this, right? I am kind of discovering here. That's okay. That's
Right.
a part of healthy development. And I mean, they see it more of here's a backlog, pick things off the top of the backlog, right? Get them done. And it's just your burn down rates. What are you doing for the sprint? These are numbers, right? We need to make our numbers. But I think that there is a human aspect to it of, well, why am I doing this work? Give me some context.
Right.
Help me understand what's going on. If you had a little bit of background, but if you had a little bit of background in development, you would understand how far that would go to just give me a little bit of the story.
Right.
Help me understand why I'm doing this work, because I promise you what I create is going to be a heck of a lot better.
Yeah, we always forget there's a human aspect to the entire process. All right. Preventions and recovery.
So the prevention and recovery from good engineers making bad systems, and preventing it. I think as far as preventing it, we've gone pretty far there, and this is for me. This is about leadership. This is about focus and direction, right? I will say though that the one kind of interesting thing that I saw over the years was my bosses, the person running, the team that I'm on, they were good leaders, right? And they knew the habits of good leaders, but they had poor leaders, right?
Ah.
And so they tried to insulate us from either the poor decisions that are happening or the lack of direction that was being given by trying to infer things and trying to, more or less create direction out of nowhere, right? And it was they were good people, and they were trying to do something right because they knew that the team needed more, but it almost every time failed in the end.
Right.
And the problem was the really bad part about it was it failed, and it looked like that person running the team made too many assumptions and tried too hard and was trying to go their own direction and be some, rogue out there.
Right.
And they weren't. It's just their leadership wasn't helping them out and giving them anything, and they knew that was horrible leadership.
Right.
So they were trying to do it, and it kills me. When I saw it twice, actually. I remember. I'll never forget the situations, and it was frustrating from all of our point of view because we knew that he was trying to be good. He was trying to do good things, but they were not helping him out at all.
This actually reminds me of a conversation I once had. It was with a salesperson that was on in the company, and they were thinking about, or actually they weren't even thinking about it. They were actually already part of a consulting firm. And one of the things that came up was around our methodologies, our practices. They're like, what makes you guys successful? What makes you guys different? And this is from a lab's perspective on different engagements. They're like, what's your secret sauce? Like, how are you guys successful? Like, everybody's doing what you're saying. So I laugh at it because it's actually a really good point that he was trying to make. You could kind of argue that there's not necessarily new information that's out there. We've come to a point where information is well shared, especially now with AI being trained on all the data that we have. You could easily go in and gather all the different parts. But I told him, I was like, honestly, it's the people, the culture, and it's the execution.
Yeah.
And he to me, it made a lot of sense. But to him, it was like, no, I don't think that's what it is. So I laugh at it because I'm like, no, but that's what it is. It's not like we're saying anything new, but what we're trying to say is having the eye to see, having the plan to know how to execute, to know how to get to some place.
Right. It's
the combination of things. So I always laugh at it. I'm like, it sounds simple in theory, but I think in practice is hard.
It's not just a checklist, right? And we're talking a lot about developer teams, right? But I want to be clear that this is just more about technologists in general. You could be doing DevOps, you could be doing development, you could be doing back-end development, front-end development, anywhere along the way, right? Doing technology is hard, right? That's the way it is. And it's hard mostly because we're humans and the technology is just ones and zeros, right? And so it's not a checklist of backlog, check, agile, check, 2 week sprints, check, right? Cloud account, check.
Is that really the secret sauce?
You can do all those things that you want to do. You can read all the books that you want to read. You can understand domain-driven design or test-driven development or whatever as much as possible. But in the end, it's people aligning with other people, right? And everybody agreeing that this is the direction that we're moving and this is how we're going to move there.
There's one last topic that I do want to bring up. We talked a lot about it, the stack, the plan, the platform. Mm-hmm. Let's touch a little bit on the platform. There's different ideas of platform. What are some of the things that comes to mind? And I'm going to throw this at you first. What are some of the things that come to mind when you talk about platform?
It's such a complex word, right?
Very. Give it to engineers who overload.
Oh my goodness. And okay, so first of all, I'm not going to include in that platform is something that I've made. I'm actually not going to put in there because that's basically software at that point. That's just a product that we've created, right? And it may be that we were tasked with creating something so all the other development teams in our organization, could be more effective. That's a platform, right? Because everybody else is consuming it, right? To do whatever they want to do, but I'm not going there. Platforms for me are, I don't know that public clouds are necessarily platforms. I would say platforms for me are things like I can plug in my code that specifically achieves some business goal, and it will help me run that code, right? So I guess Kubernetes is there. I've been hot and heavy on temporal lately. It's definitely there for orchestration and such. So those kinds of platforms. I've
Like
recently,
AWS.
I've recently
Google,
got an ECS on AWS, and that was a nice ECS with Fargate was a really nice combination there. I enjoyed doing that. Right. I had to create that, let a lot of those technologies, but in the end, I guess that was a platform because we did end up deploying all the microservices on it and everything. Platform is it's a complicated word.
It is. I like how you put it in that perspective. You named a few things, and I agree with you on those things. It's a general term when we say platform, and it can actually apply to a lot of things. You could kind of say, I have a payment platform. I got a cloud platform. You're qualifying the term platform at that perspective, right?
Right.
Versus I could have an on-prem platform. Things that we don't think about in that word platform is that I could qualify it as this is my, put whatever business name you want, platform. And a lot of us don't think that way. We think of platform right away. It's Kubernetes. It's AWS. It's Azure, GCP. Those are platforms, right? Like, yeah. So is Kafka, right? So there's, yes, generally speaking, platform is a generic term. If you qualify it with something, it becomes a platform. Here's the reason why I say this is important for a lot of companies that I'm not sure they actually think this way, but this is where I encourage them to think.
Right.
Your business is a platform, which means I have part of my platform infrastructure, a runtime environment. I have part of my platform a delivery mechanism. I have a part of my platform, we talked about it a little bit, authentication capabilities.
Right.
I have part of my platform AI capabilities. When you talk about platform from that perspective, VPs or leadership or head of product engineering, the epiphany here is to realize that your business is a platform of all these things coming together. So here's the key takeaways. Good engineers build the best system with the context that they have. That's what that's the message that we're collectively saying and trying to put out there. So therefore, how do you make a change as leadership? Well, change their circumstance. Give them the context. Give them equip them with the right data. Allow them to understand, for example, the user space. Allow them to understand the problem that they're trying to solve. Include them in the process. So I'm looking at not just engineers, but how you organize your teams that are going to deliver on those results or outcomes that you're looking for as a company. So equip your team, and we guarantee you'll have better results.
This wraps up our first series, but we're just getting started. In our next series, we're shifting focus from organizational challenges to something more personal, developer habits and environments. We'll explore how the daily practices, tools, and workflows that individual developers choose can make or break their ability to ship quality code consistently. Because while organizational dysfunction creates systemic problems, great developers find ways to be productive even in challenging environments. Thanks for listening to Going to Production. If you haven't, please consider subscribing to our podcast. I'm David Diroff, and we'll see you in the next series.